afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast Addendum with me, your host, Imperial Dane. Today's topic is going to be light vehicles in Companies 2 and the future, that is Companies 3, because, it's still likely to happen. Again, there will be someone asking, what about Companies 3? And again, short story there, they've been making surveys last year asking about our thoughts on it. Also, the game sold millions. It's not exactly rocket science that there's going to be a third game down the road. So, what about light vehicles? I mean, right now, light vehicles sort of have a particularly sort of peculiar role in the Company Hero series. They're sort of like, the sort of early mid-game units in most cases. After that stage, they just completely phase out. You just never build them in most cases again, because they pretty much just stop in all usage and utility. They just get, stomped by the late game due to the severe, amount of support weapons, but also just, tanks. They just wreck it, and thusly most light vehicles, again with few exceptions, just drop completely off the map. 2-2s, ACs, Stewards, half-tracks, most half-tracks just go away unless they somehow manage to survive that long. I mean, you'll never see an Orbital Commando S player build a flak half-track again, after a certain point, and build more than one ever, because, it just completely drops off the chart. It has no utility after a certain point. 2-2s, they'll go, maybe 1 or 2 in the early game, but after that, they never get seen again. ACs, Stewards, again, Luxes to a degree as well. The only units that sort of see any usage are the T-70, which is because, again, in some cases, and even then it's not all, because it has some heavy utilities, being able to get points, spot ahead, and can deal with infantry. The Puma, because it's kind of a mini medium tank that can take on other mediums reasonably well at a cost-effective level. And, wow, that's kind of it. Really, for the most part. Most other light vehicles just never get built after a certain point. Luxes maybe, again, if they, haven't tagged up. But that's about it. And that, again, highlights, a bit, we can basically look at the T-70, what it has other light vehicles just don't. It has utility, it has, it's very strong point, again, is dealing with infantry, but even then, beyond that, it can, be used in other fashions, which we have seen players do. That doesn't mean, of course, it gets used for it all the time, but it can be seen there. Once again, a 2-2, once again, a certain point is there, it just completely stops being useful. It just can't do anything. It can't take territory, it can't spot far ahead with a single ability. Like, you could get a spotting scope, but then you might as well get spotting scope to the rest of your stuff. And then again, it just completely drops off in its own, and it just can't do anything then. Similar with the half-tracks, it just, really like any utility. I mean, theoretically, you can enforce and all that, but in most cases, it just tends not to be enough because they're easily dealt with, and again, their overall role is just so now you can get the 250 half-track, which can't do anything except transport troops about. It has even less utility. It is priced as regular half-track, and of course, has to be called in with a large premium alongside another unit. And I do think this highlights a bit of weakness when it comes to light vehicles in the Company Hero series. They just sort of throwaway units. They just have this incredibly limited strategic role in the game. And while it's going to be pretty hard to fix in Companies 2, I mean, at least I think for Companies 3 they could overall design vehicles better for the longer term, rather than just again having these, these essential, what you could call the burn units. Like, they're just there to get stuff done, get wrecked, and then you move on from them. I mean, they just, stuff to be expended. They're incredibly expensive with the resources in most cases. Like, again, if they survive, great, but like if you lose them, you're never going to replace them because they fulfill absolutely no strategic role after that point. I mean, infantry fills more of a role than light vehicles do. I mean, in most cases, they're just soft tanks. I mean, they're just there to fulfill the tank role until you can get out tanks. And I do think, and that's again is sort of, the highlights again, just, I think we need to sort of come up with something more for light vehicles to do than just being soft tanks. I mean, they need to be able to do more on the battlefield. They need to have, more of a strategic role in a lot of cases. And I mean, obviously, in the T-7 in this case is, I think one of the, prime examples to use that. I mean, again, how about letting more light vehicles, unless they got cruisers, and just, able to pop around and decap territory, for example. They don't have to be able to seize it, but just being able to, like, say, decap and harass, I think, give some, light vehicles like the 2-2 and the AC, the M20, maybe, more utility in the game, rather than right now, again, they're just these incredibly limited units just used to hit your opponent's infantry, murder some stuff, maybe gain an edge. But again, if they get countered, you're not going to cry out, you're just going to move on because they did absolutely nothing otherwise. They're soft tanks. And again, once the real tanks arrive, they lose all purpose. They lose all role, again, except for the Puma and the T-70. And even then, like, the Puma is just mostly being used as a replacement tank. So again, it's basically just a larger soft tank, but it is still a soft tank. So again, I think just looking into more roles for the different units, again, depending on what they do, could, you know, help a lot there. And of course, it's not going to be all easy. For example, a high specialist like the 250-117 rather find themselves locked in that spot where you can't really do much else with it. Like, it's a support vehicle. I mean, you suppose you could just let it be a bit better in some ways, but then you also risk just making it too good early on. I mean, this is kind of a problem. They should just make the 250 half track flat and then have the flak upgrade as an, you know, actual upgrade. I mean, the flak gun, and then you have like some more roles, so you can that way, you know, be pushed into different elements if necessary. In most cases, you know, rather than just creating these high light vehicle specialists, which again are soft tanks, but then incredibly niche soft tanks, which again then further just drop off in utility, because again, once that role is done and again the bigger tanks come in, it just stops being useful. It just stops being fully useful, and that's hardly good. So again, you're just going to say if this was a regular half track, about a flak half track or cannon half track or pack half track, you know, depending on what level of tech you're on, I think you need to do a lot more for it. I mean, that needs to mean, you know, it's like, you know, you could consider, alright, I could go for a, you know, tank destroyer, I could just go for the pack half track, say, you know, for the later game, so I can invest my resources elsewhere, you know, different type of strategy. I mean, that will at least that way make it sort of more of a platform that could see some usage. Plus, I mean, for the regular transport half track, and again, that could, you know, apply to them to all the half tracks, you know, they could get some light suppression like they had back in Companies 1. That way, again, they had more of a, you know, purpose. They could sort of be more support units for the infantry. It could, you know, help them attack better or defend better, and maybe some other things, you know, maybe some extra smaller abilities. Maybe some have slight passive healing for units around it, like nothing super, but just, you know, slight healing, or units fight slightly better, or something else entirely, but just something so they do have a slightly broader role. And again, 2-2s can maybe be good at decapping territory. The AZ could, you know, do something else. Maybe they could have a mark ability against, they just, you know, mark out targets. I just think there needs to be something more, because right now, again, we just see, you know, you go for light vehicle, it drops off entire. After a certain point, it just drops off, and again, it just seems a bit boring. So again, I think by looking into what could be done and just giving some broader roles for the longer term, we could probably, you know, overall actually allow for more strategies. When again, all of a sudden, a unit's not just, you know, soft tanky, but, you know, a good harasser, maybe a good scout, maybe good for, you know, supporting your other units by marking out targets for them. Maybe it could, you know, I don't know, call in an artillery barrage to just smoke. I mean, there's a lot of option then all of a sudden they're just, you know, really good at decapping territory. So I think that's something that would be a really great idea to look in for Companies 3. For Companies 2, you could most likely maybe sneak in some extra abilities against some suppression here and there, mark target. But for Companies 3, again, I think just, you know, looking deeper into what they're doing could do a lot there. Again, sort of creating, you know, these weapons platforms, for example, for the 250 and half track, because it was a half track that could be upgraded in a lot of ways. Cannons, 75mm cannons, like, you know, the command tank for Panzer IV, Pack 40s here, some uses tank destroyers, or just 30mm cannons, which uses command vehicles. Different types of flak, you know. I mean, this was just a more special version, but like, there were a lot of, you know, versions of that one with flak, and there's the flak drilling as well, and all sorts. I think that could be sort of more way to, you know, make light vehicles seem less just, again, these very narrow niche unit, which are just, you know, used for a brief amount of time and then utterly discarded. It just feels weird that you have all of these light vehicles, but in most cases, a few moments up, you know, after, well, basically maybe 5 minutes, and, you know, even an hour that can match that can last an hour, they're just, you know, dead. So I mean, they're just this incredibly narrow and niche unit. It just feels really weird. So I definitely think for Companies 3, where that happens, they need to sort of look at just making light vehicles more useful, besides again that narrow 5-minute window in a lot of cases. And if they can do that, I mean, I think that certainly help out Companies 3 in just having a wider range of strategies, because again, with some you can do more with the light vehicles. You can actually build strategies around light vehicles, whereas again right now they just sort of, you rush your thing out, try to win the game there. If not, you then move on to the medium tanks. Again, they're just a small intermediate step and nothing else. So again, by looking into what they can do and then expanding what they can do and giving them more roles, I think we just, you know, see more strategies, more variety, and more fun that way. Again, short term, the word to consider for companies too, stuff like marked vehicles, suppressive fire for certain half tracks, you know, other smaller passive auras for some of the half tracks. Again, you know, small different things that just make them stand out. Could, you know, help out a lot there. Plus, again, stuff like armored cars can, you know, capture territory, at least decapture it. Maybe some can mark vehicles, and others can, you know, do other things. Could help out a lot there. So those, I think, are sort of my thoughts there. You know, again, something to help broaden. I think something that's been actually, you know, very neglected in terms of company news, not just in terms of discussion, because, and it's only something a friend pointed out to me. Again, in most cases, vehicles just, you know, like vehicles just see very little usage after a certain point. Like, they just really don't fulfill an actual role. They're just soft tanks. I mean, you didn't call them that, but that's basically what I'm calling them, because in most cases you just use them as softer tanks. Again, they can lay down some fire, they just can't take the fire like the tank, and that's basically it. So yeah, I think by broadening what they can do, I think we just, you know, overall have a more fun game as well. I mean, I'm not anticipating it's going to happen anytime soon, but it would be cool if at least just consider testing it out there with at least some smaller changes in and there. But I think for companies, they really need to look into it. That and buildings, I mean, Jesus Christ, buildings really need to be overhauled there also conceptually. I've mentioned that in several videos by now, but I'm more than happy to make more on it. But again, that's also one they really need to look into, buildings. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this little Propagandacast addendum. Hope you agreed with it. If you didn't, subscribe, like, share, comment. This is Imperial Dane signing off, and see you all another time for another video. Cheers.